Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Rebecca and this is Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials, give you some of the highlights, explain what's going on, so you have something to listen to while you're crafting out there. Today I'm covering day 2 of the trial of Wade Wilson, and yes, that is his real name. Um, More on that to come. We learn a bit about his background in this day's testimony. He has been charged with the first-degree murder of Kristine Melton and Diane Ruiz, the assault of his girlfriend. I've figured it out. This was his girlfriend that he assaulted, Melissa Montanez, and burglary of a dwelling, grand theft. He stole Kristine's car, and petty theft, because when he broke into the house, he ate and drank some of the things inside. So that's the least of his problems, I guarantee you. So, day 2, we hear from a crime scene investigator who processed Kristine Melton's black Nissan Versa. Now, this is the one he was to have stolen. And we know that he did. We saw him in it, or we're going to see him in it later on. So she said there were multiple areas that were swabbed on this vehicle that were presumptive positive for blood. So those were collected and sent to the lab for DNA processing. Then she was present at both autopsies, the one of Kristine Melton and the one of Diane Ruiz, and whatever was collected there. What the medical examiner did was take a card that they have, special card, where they put some of the blood of each victim on the card so that they can send that, the police can send that to a laboratory that's going to do DNA testing. And in this case, it was the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that did the DNA testing. And that card would allow them to have a known DNA sample from each of the victims. They collect the fingernail clippings, those kind of things. So she also participated in processing the crime scene of Diane Ruiz in the empty lot. She said that the body was not visible from the road when they pulled in. You would have had to have been walking into those woods to have found that body. So the body was not found for 3 days, not until the 10th. Then we had a canine unit sergeant that came on October 10th. At this point, Diane Ruiz is a missing person. They are looking for her. Now, October 7th was a busy day for Wade Wilson. And at the end of that day, he gets taken into custody. And I'm going to explain to you how that goes down later. But on October 10th, they're still looking for Diane Ruiz's body. And this canine officer, his personal vehicle, or his assigned vehicle, was being repaired. So he's riding along with a traffic officer. They didn't really have anything to do. So they're like, let's go looking for this missing person. So they go out to this particular area where it's sort of like Florida's full of these kind of areas where somebody comes in, a builder will come in, and they're going to build up this neighborhood, and they've got the roads and the plots and everything, and then everything just gets halted. So it's sort of like this area where nothing ever really got built. But right next to it is the area where the gentleman I talked about yesterday saw this guy backing out of the empty lot. Well, anyway, but these guys don't know that because this guy didn't come forward until after her body was found. So they don't know this information that the guy saw. But they're riding around this area, these empty lots, and they're kind of looking around. And this guy, the officer, sees a vulture. And he says, let's go. He sees them circling overhead a couple blocks from where they're at, over where this next neighborhood is. And I'm going to show you the map that I put up yesterday that has that guy's house. You remember the pen was pointing to the guy's house, and then it says body, where the body was found and where there were tire tracks found. And below that, there's like a U-shaped road. That's down to, that is the area that they were searching, the abandoned, the housing area that never got built. So they see they go a couple blocks where this vulture is, and they're trying to find out what's going on with this vulture, and that's how they find the body in this empty lot, the vulture. Thought that was interesting. Then we had the medical examiner, and he's now the chief medical examiner in Tallahassee, Florida, and he did the autopsy of Diane Ruiz. Once her body was found, it was taken for autopsy. Basically, without going through the entire autopsy, she had bruising everywhere, absolutely everywhere on her body, and especially the right side of the neck. She had her hyoid bone and her thyroid bone, which are right here, where, you would fracture, were fractured. And basically, he said to strangle somebody, you don't need to fracture those bones, but you just cut off the carotids that are here, and it cuts off the blood flow to the brain. But they were fractured. Her ribs, every single one of her ribs, front and back, were fractured. So the cause of death was asphyxiation. Same as the first body, Kristine Melton. But he said he couldn't tell the order of the injuries. He didn't know if the strangulation happened first and then everything else, or if everything else happened first, or, vice versa. Strangulation happened first and then everything else. Later on, we're going to learn how it happened. Yeah. But he said it was consistent with someone driving a vehicle over her multiple times. He also supervised the autopsy of Kristine Melton, because the woman that testified, the medical examiner that testified about the autopsy of Kristine Melton at the time had like 1 month's experience. She was brand new to doing this. He supervised it, and he did indicate, he went over the autopsy of Kristine and indicated he agreed with everything, all of her findings. So that's good. Then we had a woman from the interior design building. We already heard from one yesterday. This day we hear from another one. The interior design company had 2 different offices. One where they had an interior design library and a librarian. That's who we heard from the day before, the librarian. Then in that building where the spa was, where Melissa Montanez had her spa, was the other office of the interior design. So when this woman from yesterday heard that commotion, she called the other office and told them what was going on. And so this woman, instead of locking the door, she goes out, eventually calling her to come in to the building, and they got her inside the building for her safety, because he was going to kill her. Anyway, next person on the stand, Timothy McCormick, a Fort Myers police officer. He was called to investigate the assault at the spa and started he responded with another officer. So he let the other officer do the investigative part there. And he says, I'm going to go look for this guy, because he took off in Kristine Melton's car. So he had a description of the car. So he goes looking around for this car. And this is it's in a shopping area. And he's in this parking lot that's adjacent to this office building. And he sees the car sitting in front of Joe's Crab Shack. And he goes up to it. Here's his body cam footage of him approaching the defendant in the parking lot of Joe's Crabs. Now, I could not understand what the defendant was saying, but he's not cooperating. And here's what happened.
And it's essentially the same summary conditions when you last saw it.
Yes.
Judge State moves cases number 34 and 35 in evidence at this time.
Objection. You admitted.
Permission to publish, Judge?
You may.
So we're looking here at State's exhibit number 34. That is, in fact, the parking lot there of Joe's Crab Shack.
That is.
Where in relationship to Amila Spa is Joe's Crab Shack?
It's, if you're sitting in the parking lot of Joe's Crab Shack as it's depicted, and your car was backed into a spot, say next to the white car right there. If you look to your left across the street is where Amila's spot would be.
Now, when you made contact with Mr. Wilson. Could you please describe what his demeanor was like?
He was, he seemed nervous, and when I spoke to him, he seemed a little defensive and uncooperative.
Did you know anything he was wearing at the time?
He was shirtless, and I remember he was wearing a pair of pants that seemed to didn't fit him at the time.
And do you see the person that you made contact with there at Joe's Crab Shack in the courtroom here today?
Yes, I do.
Would you please point him out and describe an article of clothing that he's wearing?
He's sitting to my right, and he's wearing a suit with a black tie.
Judge, let the record reflect the witnesses identify the defendant as well. Okay. Permission to publish the video, Judge?
You may.
To you when my partner gets here, okay? Yeah. How about this morning? Say again. Yeah, I can do that, but I'm just waiting for my partner to get here. Yeah, absolutely. And here's what's going to happen. Is the car running? Shut the car off for me. It's off. I'm going to detain you until I figure out what exactly is going on. Wait, you don't have any trouble for me, okay? Okay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to have you step out of the car, and I'm going to detain you. Not arrest. Detain you right now, okay? And I can't have any problems. You understand me? All right. What's that? 5 I'm at Joe's Crab Shack in the parking lot. I will. I give you my word. No. I have to detain you. By our procedures, I have to detain you. Because of the battery this morning. There wasn't any battery? I will. No. Just relax. Let me see the keys to the car. Let me see the keys to the car. Keys. Wait, we're not going to have any problems. Just give me the keys to the car. Wait. Just wait till my partner gets here. L41, just need a couple more units. Don't go anywhere. Hey. Don't do it. He's in his car, attempting to take off. Back up. Yes, please. He's taking off, Fort Myers.
Yeah. He takes off. Now, the officer explained that they have a policy that they do not chase people for misdemeanors. And right now, he was just, all they knew is that he had battered this woman, which is not a felony, it's a misdemeanor. So he was not going to chase him during heavy traffic. So he got away. Apparently, once he got away, this is when he went to and broke into the home that he broke into. Crazy guy, still not wearing a shirt. Now, at this point, the defense gets up and moves for a mistrial. I'm like, what? And when I heard the officer say this statement, I thought, uh-oh. And I was right. Because it didn't sit well with me either. This officer said, they were asked, how are you going to identify this guy? And he said, well, we have pictures of his driver's license and from prior records. And I'm thinking, oh, this guy's been arrested before. This was my thought when I heard him say it. But they were not supposed to mention any of his prior records in front of the jury. So the judge gave each side, 15, 20 minutes to go research it and come back and argue that, whether or not there should be a mistrial. And the judge was doing the same thing. And they came back and said that he said that he felt like it was inadvertent, it was harmless. In this case, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make a bit of difference. So he denied the mistrial. Then we heard from Fanny Amblin. This was her home that when he left Joe's Stone Crab, he goes to her house. Fanny Amblin, and she said they had left that morning around 8:30 a.m. They're from Ohio, and this is October. This is when the snowbirds go home. So her and her husband were going home for the winter, and they had left for the airport. And they showed pictures of a lot of pictures, but the screen and glass on one of the doors had been broken out of, and they had to replace it. And then he left empty cans of White Claw seltzer, which is some kind of alcoholic beverage, all over the place. They had left them in the fridge, and they were empty cans everywhere. And he had helped himself with some food and he had left some clothing there. And she said she didn't recognize whose clothing that was. And there was a backpack sitting out. She said, that's our backpack, but that's not where we left it. And he was just messing around in their house. Anyway, next person on the stand was Stephen Tustasaka. And I'm butchering that last name because they were not asked to spell their last names, and they were just saying them very quickly. And I was like, what? So I just kind of wrote that down. This man's 46 years old. Now you can do the math because the defendant is 30 plus. So they asked him, how old were you when you learned that you were going to have a son? 13, 14. And his girlfriend was even younger than that. Shame on you. Anyway, now he lives in Lakeland, about 2 hours away. So they said neither one of us were in any position to raise a baby. So they put the baby up for adoption. And the baby was adopted by Candy and Stephen Wilson. And yes, Wade Wilson is his name. So they adopted him. They had 2 daughters, and they adopted him. But when Wade turned 18, he found his father, and he wanted a relationship with his father. But his father said Wade would just call him when he wanted something. He either needed money or he needed help of some kind. And on October 7th, he got at least 3 phone calls from Wade on that day. On the first one, he just said that he needed help, and Dad's at work. He's like, I'm at work. He said, I've done something I can't come back from. Here's a video of what the father heard.
Would see each other.
No, I went up and visited him one time in Tallahassee.
Okay. Now, did he often ask you for money?
Yes, ma'am.
Did your relationship turn into a situation where he was just asking for your help?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to turn your attention to Monday, October 7th of 2019. Did Wade Wilson get in touch with you through phone call that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was it that he told you when he called?
The first time he said he needed help. He had done something that he couldn't take back.
Did he indicate that he and his girl had gotten into an argument?
Yes, ma'am.
And who was his girl that you were aware of at the time?
I just knew her as Mila.
And did it seem that he wanted your help because of this argument?
Yes, ma'am.
When he called you, were you actually at work?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to really give your attention and time to him to try to help him at that point?
No, ma'am.
So what did you tell him when he was asking for your help?
I just told him to call me back around dinner time. I'd be done working, and we'd figure it out.
And did you at some point have a conversation with your wife about him getting in touch with you wanting your help?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, during the time that he was supposed to call, about what time was he supposed to call back?
I told him around dinner time.
Now, between the time he first called that day and dinner time, did you receive a call from a detective?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that detective looking for your son?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, When the detective was looking for your son, did you have any idea at that point of what had happened?
No, ma'am.
Did the detective want you to try to help them get in touch with your son?
She just gave me a number and said if he calls you back, we need to talk to him.
Okay. Now, did he end up calling you later that evening?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did he tell you in that call that evening?
The final call?
Nope, the call before the final call.
He just told me, he did something. There was 2 people gone that would not be back. He said, I'm a killer. I just told him to call me back. I just thought it was another story.
So at this point, when he says that there were 2 people that wouldn't be with us and that he was a killer, did you put a lot of weight into that?
No, ma'am.
Do you think he was just telling you a story?
He's a good storyteller.
So did he then call you back a 3rd time?
Yes, ma'am.
What time did he call you back?
It was around 10 o'clock.
I'm going to go back to that dinner time call. When he talked about these 2 people who were no longer with us and that he was a killer, did he show any type of remorse?
No, ma'am.
So let's go now to the 10 o'clock call. Again, your wife knew about kind of what was going on during that day.
Yes, ma'am.
And when he called back at 10, did he go into more details about what he had told you earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's start with the first girl. If you could tell the jurors, what did he tell you?
He just said he met a girl at a bar. They went back to her house, hung out for a little bit, and then she fell asleep.
What did he say happened after she fell asleep?
He said he got on top of her and choked her.
What name did he call her? Did he refer to her in a derogatory term?
He said, I choked that bitch.
Okay. And what did he say he did after he choked her?
He said he stayed in the house for a little while, and then he rolled her up and was going to try to put her in her trunk, but he couldn't lift her.
Did he say why he was unable to put her in her trunk?
He said that he felt like rigor mortis had started to set in.
And does rigor mortis make your body stiff? You didn't know?
I think so. Yeah.
So he just told you that was a reason that he couldn't lift her and get her into her trunk?
Yes, ma'am.
And when he said her trunk, it was the trunk of her car he was going to put her in?
Yes, ma'am.
So what did he tell you he did when he couldn't get her body into her own trunk?
He left her there and took her car.
What did he say about the second girl?
He said he saw her walking down the street and stopped and asked her for directions, and she got in the car with him.
What did he say happened when she got in the car with him?
He said he reached over and choked her.
And did he tell you that he choked her while he was driving?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what did he say happened after he choked her?
He said he was looking for a place to put her body.
Did he find a place where he eventually dumped her body?
Yes, ma'am.
What did he tell you about the situation when he got to the place where he was going to dump her body?
He said that he pulled her out of the car and realized that she was still breathing.
So what did he tell you he did when he realized she's still breathing?
He said he got back in the car and ran her over until she looked like spaghetti.
As he's telling you all these things, what's his demeanor as he's telling you?
He was excited.
When you say excited, what do you mean by that?
I felt like he was wanting me to feel the way he felt about it.
Did he seem proud of it?
Yes.
Did he seem to show any kind of remorse?
No, ma'am.
And was he able to go into great detail about both of these ladies' deaths?
Yes, ma'am.
The second girl that he killed and left in this lot, did he think that she would be found?
No, ma'am.
He seemed to think he did a good job hiding her body.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And he said this was on speakerphone. And so his wife also heard it. He also admitted during this conversation, well, because this was during a subsequent conversation, because after the first conversation, he says, call me back at dinner time. Then he calls him back at dinner time. Then he calls him back later. And that's when he goes into details about what he had done. And he said, wow, because he's got him on speakerphone and he's asking his dad, he's like, I broke into this house. That's where I'm at now. Can you just send me an Uber? So his dad's like, yeah, I'm going to send you an Uber. Well, his wife's sitting in the background messaging the police because between phone calls that day, he had also received a phone call. The father had received a phone call from a detective looking for Wade Wilson. And they had taken the detective's cell phone number that they were going to give to Wade to call him. They didn't know what this was about. So they had the guy's cell phone number. So now his wife is texting the guy, here's where he's at. And his dad says, I'm going to need your address if I'm going to order you an Uber. And so Wade gives him the address. So the police come over there and I think they have had probably 10 police officers and they're like, come out with your hands up. They had a speaker thing and they were also able to call him on his phone. And he said, I just need to call my dad and then I'll come out. He wanted to call his dad one more time. And then he came out. And he was cooperative. And they took him into custody. Yep. Then we heard from a Florida Department of Law Enforcement DNA analyst. And basically, all those stuff that was wrapped around the body of Kristine Melton, all those clothing items and everything of that was tested. And 2 contributors, some had 3 contributors, some had 4 contributors, but 2 of those contributors were Wade Wilson and Kristine Melton. 700 billion to 1, and we know there's only 8 billion people on this planet, so it was his DNA. But was there any doubt that he did it? If there was, then the next person's going to do away with that. Because first we have another corrections officer from the jail. He gets a request from Wade that he wants to talk to the police. And this is 3-4 days later. He wants to talk to police. So this corrections officer calls the detective and says, he wants to talk. So they go down there with a tape recorder, and I wanted to play it for you, but I could not understand a daggum thing. So I went and got my headphones, because sometimes you can hear these things better if you listen through a headphone. I couldn't make sense of it. I don't know that the jury could. So following this testimony and this recording, the state rests. So the defense says, we need to talk to our client. The client wanted to talk to them before he decided finally whether he was going to testify or not. So the judge gives them 15 minutes. They come back. He says, no, I'm not going to testify. And they're like, defense rests. Tie it up in a bow. He rests. So they said they had the jury come back this morning for closing arguments. Now, I'm going to do a separate video of the entire closing arguments. And the reason I think that's important for you to hear, I didn't want to put it in this video. It would make it way too lengthy. The totality of the closing arguments was maybe 45 minutes long. So that's a separate video. But if you want to listen to that, that gives you some insight, and it gave me some insight into what he was saying on that recording that we couldn't hear. He was bragging about the murders, talking about how he ran over Diane Ruiz 10 to 20 times. She looked like spaghetti, and he was basically bragging about everything. And then we learned from the defense counsel that he was on Flocka. What? Now, if you've never heard of Flocka, around 2015 through 2020, like this 5-year period of time, I don't think it's as bad as it was back then, but this was a horrible problem in South Florida. Horrible problem. I remember, because in addition to being a lawyer, I was also a nurse. I remember working as a nurse, and these people would come in, because I worked as a risk manager in a psych facility. These people would be brought into the emergency room, and they could rip the freaking doors off the hinges. It just gives you like this superhuman strength, and gives you side effects are paranoia, violent behavior, hallucinations. Now, I'm gonna call bullshit on this, because this is not consistent with somebody who's having sex with someone else and then driving somewhere and then sleeping with them again and killing them while they sleep. And then, a few hours later, they're beating up their girlfriend. And right after that, they're, no, I'm just saying no. And it's not a defense to anything. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's not a defense. He didn't plead insanity. He didn't do any of that. But you do see from watching the closings that the defense attorney, and I'm like, oh, is he finally going to say something? Because he didn't even cross-examine half the witnesses. He gets up and he says, I'm not going to argue that he didn't do it, because clearly we can see that he did it. Like, oh, okay. But what he argued was there was no premeditation. Now he's trying to save this guy's life, because if he's convicted of first-degree murder, these 2 counts, he's facing the death penalty. So he said there was no premeditation. No, this was second-degree murder. And second-degree murder language of that, you have to look for a depraved mind. And he says clearly this was depraved. I agree, but it was also premeditated. Just based on his own statements that he was looking for someone else. He had already killed that morning. He was looking for another person. He finds this woman, he dupes her into getting it into his car because he needs directions to the high school. And she's like, it's right over. And he's like, I went over there. I couldn't find it. Can you come? Can you show me? She gets into his car. He chokes her to death. I'm sorry. That's premeditation. Yeah. But he was trying to argue to the jury. No, it's not premeditated. You can find second-degree murder, So the jury was given instructions. 2 of them were excused, not fully because they still have the death penalty phase, but excused from these deliberations. And they deliberated about an hour. I don't know what took them an hour. It would have taken me 30 seconds. I guess I have to go through everything because he had a lot of charges. So here is the verdict. Now, if you go ahead and watch the closings and then you want to watch the verdict, you can pause this, watch the closing, come back, watch the verdict, or you don't have to watch the closings. It's okay. I just kind of gave you the gist of it anyway. But here's the verdict.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my understanding is you have reached a verdict. All right, do you have the verdict form? All right, we pass that to the bid. Verdict form appears to be in order. I'll have the clerk publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 20th Judicial Circuit and in Fort Lee County, Florida, criminal action. State of Florida versus Wade Wilson. Case number 19 CF 0568. Verdict. We, the jury, finds as follow as to the defendant in this case. Count 1, first-degree murder, Kristine Melton. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 2, grand theft motor vehicle. The defendant is guilty of grand theft motor vehicle. Count 3, battery. The defendant is guilty of battery. Count 4, first-degree murder, Diane Ruiz. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder. Count 5, burglary of dwelling. The defendant is guilty of burglary of a dwelling. Count 6, first-degree petty theft. The defendant is guilty of first-degree petty theft. Dated 6/12/24, so say we all, 4-person.
All right, does the other party wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, please.
All right. Let me just find number. Okay. Wait, no.
Yes. Guilty of first-degree murder of Kristine Melton, guilty of first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz, guilty of battery of Melissa Montanez, guilty of grand theft for the automobile of Kristine Melton, guilty of breaking and entering for the home of the Amblins, and guilty for petty theft for what he stole from the Amblins. So they have excused the jury. They're going to come back next Thursday, not tomorrow. I don't know why. Next Thursday at 9 a.m. to begin the death penalty phase. Now, I've explained that during the Chad Daybell case, and we're just right on the back of that. But in Florida, a jury does not have to be unanimous as to the death penalty. With Chad, if even one person said, no, we don't have the death penalty, then there was not going to be a death penalty. It would have been life in prison without the possibility of parole. But in Florida, it only has to be 8 out of 10 people. Yes. If 8 people say yes and 2 people are saying no, he's still going to be convicted and face the death penalty. And that all stems out of that case that happened down in Miami, the Parkland shooter, where the jury could not unanimously agree on the death penalty. So he got life in prison times, like, I think he killed 17 people. Yeah. So people were pretty upset about that. So they tried to change the law since then. In any case, it does not have to be unanimous. Now, this was an act that was committed back in 2019. So I don't know if the argument is going to be they have to be unanimous because it occurred back in 2019. I don't know. We're gonna have to find out. So maybe between now and next week, I'll do some more research and figure out, the jury situation with that. But this will be his opportunity to present mitigation. Now, his lawyers didn't do a whole lot during this trial, so I don't know what they're going to do for mitigation. Show that he's a good guy. It sounds like he went to FSU for a little while because Dad had said he visited him up in Tallahassee at one point. So at some point, this guy went terribly wrong. Terribly wrong. Okay, so that's that case. Tie it up in a bow, wrap it up, send it off, and I will look for another one for you. Have a great day, everybody. Take care. Bye.